Welcome back. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating exploration of traditional Korean philosophy. Specifically, we're looking at the Earth-human relationship in Donghak and Daesun thought. We're going to focus on two very unique human archetypes. If you've ever felt this burning, impatient desire to just figure everything out right this second, or on the flip side, if you've spent years patiently mastering a single craft, you're probably going to see a reflection of yourself here. Through this explainer, we'll unpack exactly how traditional Korean thought categorized these two distinct paths to learning and enlightenment.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll set the stage with the Earth-human relationship. Then we'll meet the urgent seeker, the Simgeub doyu. After that, we'll look at the embodied master, the Dotong gunja, before finally seeing how these two create a complementary harmony.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the Earth-human relationship. The core goal of the research we're looking at today is to examine how traditional knowledge transmission actually shaped these philosophies. It maps out the network of relationships within traditional Confucianism, showing us that Confucianism and Taoism didn't just exist in a vacuum. They were constantly interacting, constantly influencing each other throughout Korean history. And to understand this grand Earth-human relationship, basically how mortals connect with divine truth, we really have to look at how wisdom was handed down through generations, because that mechanism is exactly what created these distinct archetypes of seekers we're about to discuss.
Which brings us to part two. Let's meet our first archetype, Simgeub doyu, the urgent seeker.
So the term Simgeub doyu basically translates to a Confucian scholar who is completely devoted to Taoism. But with a catch, they're seeking urgent, immediate enlightenment of the mind. You can think of the Simgeub doyu like an incredibly passionate but maybe a bit impatient student. They are driven by this hasty, almost frantic desire to understand the universe right now. There's no waiting around for decades to hit a plateau of wisdom. They want that light bulb to turn on immediately. It's an archetype defined by a massive sense of intellectual and spiritual urgency.
And this urgent, highly individualistic journey usually happens when someone lacks a guiding master but still just craves the truth. Look at this historical quote from the text. "I also had no measure of learning and mastery because I could not meet a great teacher. However, while reading the book, I was able to distinguish where loyalty lies and realized a lot on my own." That perfectly encapsulates the Simgeub doyu experience, doesn't it? Notice the isolation here. In traditional systems, not having a master was a huge handicap. But this seeker, they compensate with sheer, unyielding effort. They dive into the text alone, relying entirely on their own internal compass to figure things out. It's a rapid, solitary, and honestly, a slightly unanchored pursuit of wisdom.
Now let's flip the coin for part three, Dotong gunja, the embodied master.
If our previous archetype was the cramming, fiercely independent student, the Dotong gunja is the exact opposite. This is the lifelong practitioner who patiently internalizes and really lives the knowledge. They're known as a gentleman of enlightenment. The key words to focus on here are master, embody, and harmoniously practice. This isn't someone grasping a concept in a hasty flash of realization. Instead, they let the truth marinate. Over years, they integrate it into every single aspect of their being until it's just a seamless part of their character.
To really understand this master, we have to look at their traits, because they move way beyond just personal enlightenment and take on the heavy mantle of societal responsibility. First off, they aren't isolated. They actively inherit the tradition and academic lineage of Taoism. Second, they reject haste. It's all about harmonious practice. Third, their realization only comes through the absolute completion of discipline. But honestly, it's that final trait that's the real game changer. A Dotong gunja doesn't just sit alone in a cave hoarding wisdom. They take what they've embodied and apply it directly to taking responsibility for society and their country.
Historically speaking, these figures played an absolutely indispensable role in continuing the lineage of Confucianism. Within this framework, the Dotong gunja acted as the anchor. Without them, that whole knowledge transmission system we talked about earlier, it would just collapse. They're considered the ideal personality because they act as a historical bridge. They're the ones ensuring that the core moral and academic values of the past are successfully carried into the future.
There's this beautiful historical translation in the research that perfectly captures the essence of the master. It says, regarding Taotong, Qi and Hamyong are inseparable from each other. The reason they cannot be separated is because sacred learning complements each other like hands and feet. So Qi here represents the intellectual pursuit of knowledge, while Hamyong is the deep internal cultivation of your character. The text is arguing that these two are literally inseparable, like hands and feet. You can't walk the path of the Dotong gunja with just book smarts, and you definitely can't do it with just good intentions. The two have to move together in perfect, synchronized harmony.
Which brings us perfectly to our final section, Part 4, a complementary philosophical harmony.
So, you might be wondering at this point, do these two contrasting paths actually clash with each other? I mean, is the urgent seeker considered wrong and the harmonious master right? Or is there some deeper, hidden connection between the hasty scholar and the patient gentleman?
When you lay their daily methods and values side by side, the difference is pretty stark. On one side, we have the Simgeub, hasty practice, urgent enlightenment, highly individual focus. On the other side, the Dotong gunja, harmonious practice, embodied truth, societal and national responsibility. Looking at it like this, they seem like total opposites, right? Almost like competitors in the realm of traditional thought.
But ultimately, the research reveals they aren't opposing forces at all. They essentially form a complementary relationship, representing the ideal human realization of moral and academic values. Think about it. The urgency and that intense individual drive of the Simgeub doyu, that's often the necessary spark that kicks off the journey. It's the passion you need to seek out the truth in the first place. But that raw energy has to eventually mature. It evolves into the harmonious, disciplined, and societally focused practice of the Dotong gunja. Together, they actually form the complete picture of how humanity reaches its highest potential within this philosophical framework.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought to ponder long after this explainer ends. How do you balance the passionate urgency of a seeker with the steady wisdom of a master in your own life? We all have that inner Simgeub that wants immediate answers, right? But cultivating our inner Dotong gunja is what actually allows us to truly benefit society and impact the world around us. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into traditional Korean philosophy. Keep reflecting on these ideas, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.